right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Richfield Planning Commission meeting, December 9th, 2019. Thanks everybody for being here. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of November 25th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, so no discussion. All in favor say aye. All nay. All right, the motion passes. The minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is an opportunity for citizens to address the Planning Commission for items that are not on, oh, I need to approve the agenda. Okay. Is the opportunity for citizens to address the commission for items that are not on the agenda. All right, well, so we don't have anybody here that would like to speak about anything that is not on the agenda. The next item would be approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the agenda has been approved. All right, so the first item on our agenda is a public hearing to consider an amendment to approve development plans at Cedar Point Commons, requesting approval of a standalone trash enclosure for the eastmost retail building at 1840 66th Street East. Staff?
All right. Plans for Cedar Point Commons were approved by the City Council in 2006, allowing the construction of Target, Home Depot, TCF Bank, and several standalone retail buildings. In 2016, the City Council approved an amendment to the plan unit development, granting approval of 2 additional retail buildings and a child care center, completing the nearly 30-acre development. The easternmost retail building at 1840 66th Street is home to the restaurants Five Guys and Cafe Zupas. In accordance with zoning code requirements for new development, the building was designed with an interior trash room for dumpster storage. Hempel Companies, the property owner, is now proposing to add a standalone dumpster enclosure out in the parking lot. The applicant states that the interior trash room, accessible only from the rear or south side of the building, presents a hardship for the trash haulers to access those dumpsters around the perimeter of the building due to the presence of retaining walls at the building's southeast corner. They also state that the current trash room is not adequately sized to meet Hennepin County's new requirement mandating collection of organics, which will require an additional container. And that requirement goes into effect in 2020. A letter from Hempel Companies is attached to the staff report in the Planning Commission agenda, along with site plans showing the location of the proposed dumpster enclosure. Since 2007, the zoning code has required that all refuse collection and recycling collection be designed into the interior space of buildings, while buildings constructed prior to that are permitted to use standalone trash enclosures that meet certain design requirements. The requested deviation from code requirements necessitates that the amendment be brought before the Planning Commission and City Council for approval. While the proposed enclosure is a deviation from normal code requirements for new buildings, the building materials will complement the principal buildings of the development, and the enclosure will be positioned to minimize impacts to parking lot circulations and views from off-site. City staff have reviewed the proposal and do not anticipate any adverse impacts. Finding that the requirements to grant an amendment are met, staff recommends approval.
All right, great, thank you. Would the applicant like to come up and speak a little bit? And if you could just go to the podium, sign in, and state your name.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ben Krisnak with Hempel Companies, one of the developers of this project, and thanks for hearing this little tiny little deal we need to handle. A trash enclosure, probably not the most exciting project to review, but it's important for us in terms of being able to service the property. It's a very high traffic location, obviously being close to the airport, Mall of America, Target, Home Depot. generate a lot of traffic for our tenants, and they're producing a lot of trash, which is just a result of volumes that they're doing. So we're pleased, but it creates a couple operational challenges. One is this trash room was not sized to handle, and if we weren't able to leave the dumpsters out in the parking lot, which is where they are now, we'd have to have a garbage truck there a couple times a day picking up, which isn't environmentally friendly and is disruptive to the neighborhood as well. So it's going to cost us a few bucks to build a really nice trash enclosure. It's going to have a roof on it. It's built out of the same materials, the brick and stone that you see on the other buildings, and so very durable. A concrete pad inside, so the trash dumpsters won't sink into the ground. So very well built and designed. Yeah. Happy to take any questions.
All right, great, thank you.
I just have a quick question. What's the square footage of the room that you have right now?
You know, it's about 10 by 12.
And what's the square footage of the proposed building?
It takes up, it's like 20 feet by 12 feet, so it's about double the size.
Okay.
And I think the square footage is one component to it. It's also the layout of the spaces. The dumpsters are a certain size, and maneuvering them is challenging around the outside of the building due to their size.
Thank you. Ethan.
Yeah, and so this will be enough to accommodate the composting dumpster that you're going to be have to have next year.
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, and, you know, we'll be getting more of these because that's going to be a new requirement from Hennepin County for organic composting, which is great.
Yeah.
But you got to, I know the businesses have to provide for an extra dumpster, and I know that there is some issues with that, but it's to the good. So I'm glad you're thinking about that.
Aside from that, do you know why the trash is more than you expected originally? Is it more customers or just a higher rate of trash?
I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, so to speak, but Five Guys is probably the they produce a lot of trash because of, I guess, the peanuts that they offer, and not everyone finishes all their fries, I guess.
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, the structure that you're building, is it still, are the gates open or is it fully enclosed as if it's a small building?
There's gates on it
Okay.
that
So-
are built from the same kind of metal that the
Okay, so just for staff, this would be different than like the structure at Lindale Station where it is a fully sealed off interior building?
That's correct. It would use gates as
Okay.
as doors rather than a roll-up
Okay.
utility door.
So other than like aesthetics, is there a reason for the existing policy? Is it like more likely to have vermin problems or anything like that by it being open like this?
This policy was put in place, one, because the outside structures can be unsightly, and also they're generally kept cleaner if they're inside the building.
Okay.
They're maintained really well if they're right next to a tenant's space. Yes.
But you're not concerned about that being an issue here further from the buildings?
To be honest, I don't think there are a lot of options here.
Okay.
We have had them design the space so that you can wash it down. Our environmental health folks have looked at it. The building is nicely designed. I think we have to find a solution to move this out because of the space needs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, great, thank you. So now I will open up a public hearing. So if anybody here has any thoughts or would like to speak on this, now would be your time. And each person will have 5 minutes if they would like to speak. All right, it does not look like anybody has any strong feelings about this who is present at this meeting. So would somebody like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. So It looks like we would need somebody to make a motion to approve the resolution amending this plan unit development.
I'll make a motion recommending approval of a resolution amending the planned unit development, conditional use permit, and final development plan for Cedar Point Commons.
And I'll second.
All right, do we have any discussion on that? Okay, so moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. The approval of the resolution amending the planned unit development, conditional use permit, and final development plan for Cedar Point passes. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. The next item up on our agenda is a public hearing to consider rezoning an amendment to the Market Plaza Village Shores planned unit development, requesting approval of a new building for a bank branch with a drive-up ATM. Staff.
Plans for the Market Plaza and Village Shores mixed-use development were originally approved in 1984, and construction was completed in 1986. In 2016, the City Council approved an amendment to the planned unit development allowing the property to make major renovations, including the addition of a medical clinic, assisted living units, and resident amenity spaces. Modifications to the building exterior included improved facades, removal of dated building embellishments, and an updated color scheme. It was at this time that the corner plaza and pergolas were added to the property. At that time, staff urged the property owner to consider eliminating the surplus parking in this area in favor of either permanent quasi-public space or an additional retail building at the corner to better activate this key downtown intersection. With the renovation of Market Plaza now complete, plans have been submitted for a new retail building for a Chase Bank branch, including a drive-up ATM lane in the parking lot. The applicant has submitted applications requesting approval of a major amendment to the planned unit development for Market Plaza, as well as rezoning the property from planned multifamily residential to planned mixed use. The comprehensive plan designates this site and the greater Lyndale Avenue and 66th Street area as mixed use. However, as Market Plaza was developed prior to the existence of a mixed-use zoning district, the property has remained zoned planned multifamily residential over the years. State statutes require that zoning designations match the comprehensive plan. Staff felt it was appropriate for the property to be rezoned in conjunction with this proposal, and we do recommend approval of the ordinance rezoning the property to planned mixed use. The proposed use as a retail bank branch and the building design complies with all zoning code requirements. The building would be located in place of the current plaza and pergolas, with customer entrances accessible from the parking lot as well as from the public sidewalk. The proposal includes high-quality architectural design that complements the existing Market Plaza development. Due to grade differences between the sidewalk and the existing parking lot, the building would sit lower than the sidewalk at the roundabout edge. To delineate this grade change, the proposal includes a short retaining wall topped by a decorative metal railing. Pedestrian access is maintained via stairs at the corner, as well as an accessible ramp that lines up with the Lyndale Avenue crosswalk. The applicant proposes to include a standalone drive-up ATM located just northeast of the building, accessible via a slip lane in the parking lot. All vehicle access will occur through the existing entrances and parking lot. No additional curb cuts to public streets are proposed. Between the ATM lane and the public street, the applicant is proposing to build a pocket park or plaza with amenities that are accessible to the public, including landscaping, benches, natural stone seat walls, public art, bicycle repair station, and space for bicycle parking and or a future bike share station that would be provided by the city or other vendor, not by the applicant. In the mixed-use zoning district, drive-up window or teller service is a conditionally permitted use, provided that the conditions outlined in the zoning code are met. The proposal does meet many of these conditions with the following exceptions. It does not, the proposed drive-up ATM does not meet the following two requirements. The first is that a minimum distance of 500 feet must be maintained between substantially similar uses with drive-up or teller service as measured property line to property line. The proposal is less than 500 feet from a substantially similar use, that being the BMO Harris Bank at 6625 Lindale Avenue. Measured property line to property line right across the roundabout, that distance is just 185 feet. However, the BMO Harris Bank is a bit unusual in that it shares a single lot with the larger Woodlake Center office complex. If measured instead to that bank building, the distance separating these two bank uses is actually about 350 feet, which obviously still falls short of the 500-foot buffer requirement. Policymakers should consider if an overconcentration of drive-through uses near the city's main downtown intersection is a concern more specific to fast food uses, or if that concern includes financial institutions as well. Considerations should also include whether the proximity of the existing BMO Harris Bank alone warrants denial of this proposal. The second code requirement that's not met is that queuing space for at least 4 cars is required, measured from the teller station or ATM in this case. And that queuing space is intended to be provided so that a line of cars does not interfere with parking spaces or traffic circulation. In the initial plan submittal, the proposal did include a much larger drive-through loop that met this queuing requirement, but in effect fell short of many other requirements and did not allow for any of the plaza space you see on the current plans. With staff's feedback, that loop was replaced with the current proposed ATM slip lane that is further from the public street and allowed for the proposed plaza to be added. By code, this queuing requirement applies equally to all drive-through uses, including fast food restaurants that are likely to have longer average dwell times per customer than an ATM would. Staff finds here that it is reasonable to allow a shorter queuing distance for an ATM than would be required for these other more intense drive-through uses. The remaining 12 out of the 14 required conditions to allow a drive-up facility are met, and those were discussed in detail in the staff report. Planned unit developments may offer flexibility to code requirements in exchange for superior building design and the innovative and efficient use of land. The proposed drive-up ATM has been designed to minimize negative impact to both to the existing site and to public infrastructure. The addition of a well-designed building with active street frontage and the pocket park amenity are a significant improvement over the existing parking lot plaza at the corner. Engineering staff have reviewed the proposal and do not anticipate any adverse impacts to public infrastructure. Finding that the requirements to grant an amendment are met, staff recommends approval of the attached ordinance and resolution. That concludes the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions, and the development team is here as well to take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Would the applicant like to get up and maybe say a little bit about their presentation?
My name's Charlie Vaughn. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a commercial real estate developer for about the last 30 years, and I have done multiple projects in and around the Minneapolis area over the last 6 years, and started working on this location several months ago, 8 or 9 months ago, trying to figure out a use that could go there with the constraints of the size of the location. We kind of discovered the grade issues as we got further into the process once we really started doing our engineering on it. We've had a couple of conversations and a nice meeting with your staff, at which time we learned that not only it's a very prominent location, but understand now the importance of it as it relates to the city of Richfield. And we were told of several things that we could do to try to enhance the look of it and the experience of the residents of Richfield, which include the things that Matt spoke about with the park and the sculpture, the rideshare bicycle things. And we've really done our best to try to add as many of those amenities. I think we added all of them that were brought up, and still, have enough property and parking to still conduct the business that we're investing a lot of money to do there. So we've feel like we've done our best. We hope that the Planning Commission will agree with that. And if you have any questions, I've got our architect and engineer here with me as well.
Great, thank you. So commissioners, would you like to ask? I'm assuming they might have some questions.
Actually, my question was for you, if you wouldn't mind going back up. Yeah, thank you. So my question at this point is about the grade difference. So I went and walked the site, and you can see that at a certain point it transitions, but I think the staff report was actually a little bit misleading in suggesting that it's between the parking lot and the sidewalk. Currently, that enhanced part of the parking lot is about at sidewalk grade, and then that transition happens behind that and the sort of regular asphalt parking lot. So I'm a little bit concerned about the idea that you're going to lower the existing grade to take it away from the sidewalk grade and down to the rest of the parking lot grade. So I'm wondering, why did you choose to have that transition on the street side versus on the parking lot side, or why not regrade a larger area of the parking lot so everybody could come in on the same level?
Well, we certainly, that would make it easier on everyone, as you suggest. And as we got into the engineering, I don't think any of us, until we got the actual grades, realized the amount of slope and the amount of grade differential. If you walk past back where the trellises are now and the pavers, there's about a 2.5 foot retaining wall there now. And our building will occupy just about all of that trellis and pavement area.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to, accommodate, we can't really change the existing grades of the parking lot as it exists in the center. And so trying to, get the ADA accessible ramps without too many steps, et cetera. Dave and his group came up with, kind of a compromise. It was like, hey, we can drop it a little bit at the street level. If we dropped it, all the way down, then we've got even more. There's a little bit of grade still left in the parking lot. So, and again, Dave could probably address it from more of a technical standpoint than I can.
Okay.
And
Can you clarify why you aren't able to regrade a larger area of the parking lot to get it all at the same level? You said that wasn't a possibility, but
as far as, right now, the parking area that the customers will use is 3 feet plus or minus below the roundabout. And so if you put the building at the roundabout grade, we've got a 3 foot issue to overcome in the back, in which we would have to, I think, eliminate a lot of parking spaces to.
David Knabley with Civil Site Group.
Could you just state your name and speak in, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, David Knabley with Civil Site Group, with the civil engineer on the project. Commission members, yeah, we looked at trying to amend some of the grades in the parking lot, but it's just too substantial of a removal and replacement that would be required to get the grade change that's there to get it up the street side. It'd be, if we could do it, it'd be, half or 3/4 of that whole parking lot that would have to be removed and replaced to get that grade change to work, is kind of what we initially looked at. We thought it was a better fit for this site, to keep it at the grades that we have proposed.
okay. And did you also look at something internal to the building? I am very concerned about, you put a lot of design sensibility into the building, and I really like the look of the building out of context. But when you see it in that rendering, and half of your experience walking by is seeing this railing, and the building's half buried underground,
yeah,
it kind of spoils the effect of that. So I am curious, did you look at doing like an entrance that's at street level and then do a ramp inside the building instead of it all happening outside right by the sidewalk?
We've looked at some of those, and again, I don't mean to pass the buck, but yeah, we've looked at some of those options. They just, I don't think they're feasible from an architectural standpoint to try to get the grade changes that are needed inside the building and the space that we've got there on that corner. Just felt like it was a little too much for making that work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Questions over up here?
Any other questions for the architect while he is up there? All right, great, thank you. From my perspective, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, is I really did like some of the concerns that Sean raised, and they were raised in a way that I would not be able to phrase them. And so I don't know if we could go through some of these questions here, or if we could do that now.
Yes, so just to clarify, Commissioner Hayford O'Leary provided staff with a letter summarizing some questions, and I did include a copy of that in the public copy packet out there, if anyone's looking for that. And it will be attached to the minutes from tonight as well. So by all means, go ahead.
Madam Chair, of course, I would be happy to discuss what I wrote with staff, but I guess my preference would be to do it after the public hearing, unless you think it's important the public comment on this. I guess
no,
I'd
we
just like
can-
to hear from people if they
Yeah,
have
for
something to
sure. We
say.
could do it definitely after. I just didn't know at what point we'd want to go through those questions. So great. Thank you.
Question for staff. Where did you say that you attached Commissioner Hayford O'Leary's comments?
Another tab in your reader.
Yep, so it is
Thank
open
you.
on your PCs up there.
Got it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we will open up the public hearing portion of the meeting. So for those of you in the crowd here who would like to talk a little bit about this project or give your feelings, now is your time. Everybody who wants to speak will have 5 minutes to speak, and just come on up to the podium, state your name, and sign in, and tell us what you think.
And Chair Hoberg, members of the commission, I did hear from 2 residents of the Woodlake Point condo buildings next door. So that's at 6500 Woodlake Drive, just to the immediate west of this property, with some general concerns about traffic and parking, but also specifically about that private street, Woodlake Drive, if there was the concerns about increased traffic on that private street that runs between the 2 properties.
Okay, great. Thank you. So is there anybody? Oh, come on up.
My name is Dan Peterson. I'm a resident of the City Bella unit. And just a question, it sounds like part of the proposal is changing the zoning requirements for the area on an ongoing basis, not only just for this building. And I'm wondering what implications that would have for other building development in the parking lot or on the property. And does the parking space available, is that adequate for the bank and for any other future development? In particular, I guess I would ask if there are any, if this does open up to other buildings, are there any height limitations and anything that would cause, blockage of view for residents of City Bella? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Staff, would you like to speak to what the zoning change, what the longer term effect would have now, or would you like to wait till after the public hearing?
I guess it's up to you. If there are other speakers, we can summarize and address all questions at once. Otherwise, if no one else wishes to speak, we can answer that
Okay.
now.
My name is Joanne Verwink. I'm also a resident at City Bella. One question, what is the process of the Planning Commission for approving or not approving this? I'm a new resident to Richfield, not familiar with what the process is. So how long does it take to approve or not approve? Are there future hearings on this? If it is approved, what would be the construction start time? How long would the construction last? What would be the permanence? What is projected to be the permanence of the building? In surrounding suburbs, it's often common for a building to go up, be used for a few years, 5 years, 10 years, and then be torn down and something more substantial taking its place. And then finally, are there any plans for other residential type buildings in the Market Plaza area?
Great, thank you. And we're taking these questions down and we'll address them at the end. Anybody else would like to get up? Oh, great.
My name is James Howard, and my concern, having been a Richfield resident for 41 years, is that things don't always wind up as they appear. And the concern that I have is that we approved this building, I believe, as a single-story building, but the footings and everything goes in to handle increased height. What guarantees do we have that this building won't grow taller in a few years, depending upon its popularity?
Great, thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, if there is nobody else here who would like to speak during the public hearing portion, then we will make a motion to close the public hearing. So would somebody like to make a motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. So now we will open it up to some of the Planning Commission who might have some questions, and then staff can give some answers to some of the issues that were raised.
Actually, Chair Hilberg, I think it would probably be best if we answered the public's questions, and then before we add more.
Yes, great. What I was going to say is I'm excited to hear about the zoning question that he had first talked about. So that's just what I was going to finish. Thank you.
Sure. So the current zoning around Lyndale and 66th Street, many of the properties were developed as planned unit developments or PUDs. Many of them developed as PUDs prior to the existence of Richfield having a mixed-use zoning district, just like the property we're talking about. City Bella, for example, I believe City Bella and many of the other properties are zoned PC2 or planned general commercial. That was the zoning district that they were developed in at the time. In a planned unit development, like was said in the staff report, PUDs offer flexibility in code requirements in exchange for superior design, efficient use of land, etc. With regards to building height, generally in a PUD, the allowed building height is the height that was approved. So for City Bella, that particular property, the approved building height is what it was built at. The same would be true of Market Plaza. So I believe City Bella is like a 14 or 15 story building. And Market Plaza, roughly 10 stories. So that 10 stories is the approved height on that property. If they were proposing a different building here at the corner that was of a different height, it would be reviewed through the same process as this, through a major PUD amendment that would go to Planning Commission and staff. I certainly understand the concern of losing one's views from a property like City Bella. Certainly a unique housing product in the Richfield market. But the reality is that no one owns anything outside of their own property, and that extends to views. Should an applicant in the future come back with a proposal for a taller building on this corner or any other corner in this mixed-use downtown district, the city would evaluate it, looking at the comprehensive plan and zoning codes in place. The comprehensive plan and mixed-use zoning district have very specific policy language supporting height and taller buildings at our key downtown intersections. So for those concerned about that happening in the future, I can't really offer you anything to lessen those fears. Regarding, so there was a question about the process for this application. The Planning Commission conducts the public hearing and provides a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will do the final consideration of this proposal at 2 City Council meetings in January. I believe the final consideration would be January 28th. So that would be the next meeting on this item, would be at the City Council in January, where they would potentially make a final decision. Oh, but the public hearing is, just to clarify, the public hearing is tonight. That City Council meeting would not be an additional public hearing. Tonight was the opportunity to speak on this item. I will refer the questions about the construction timeline, expected construction start and completion. I'll refer those to the developer, and they maybe can also speak to that question about the permanence of the building. There was a question about parking spaces. The Market Plaza property has a large surplus of surface parking relative to the amount of commercial space at the property. I did look at some of the numbers on that. So there's 263 surface parking spaces there today. The addition of the bank, the Pocket Park and Drive Up ATM results in a net reduction of 32 spaces. That's down to 231. There's different ways of calculating what would be required by the various businesses in the center, between a medical clinic and office, and then the various retail users. I came up with the requirement for that space today being about 201 spaces. The city code also offers a 10% parking reduction for proximity to frequent public transit service, which this site would definitely qualify for. That would further reduce the requirement to approximately 181 spaces. So depending on how you look at it, you're looking at even after the addition of the bank and that net reduction of 32 spaces, you're still looking at a surplus of 20 to 50 spaces in the lot there.
Could I ask a follow-up question to the Market Plaza PUD? So you had said that the height would be 10 stories, that was approved for that site plan at Market Plaza. So if they were to build an additional building, would it automatically be at 10 stories, or would it come before the Planning Commission again to amend?
It would, yes. Any new construction, commercial or mixed-use building of any height, even the one-story one in front of us, would come to the Planning Commission and City Council for approval. In a planned unit development, all uses are conditional, meaning they need a conditional use. A conditional use permit must be approved. The height, the maximum height, the base maximum height in the mixed-use zoning district is 12 stories that are allowed. So anything at 12 stories and lower would be an approved height, but of course, because it's a PUD, would still be conditional and require the additional considerations that come along with a conditional use permit.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, or would we like to go? I would like to start digging into the email that you wrote,
Sure,
Commissioner O'Leary. So we could probably just.
I just add, because it's relevant to what Matt just said, is so it was because mixed use designation wasn't out when that was designated. It was PMR, right? Okay, and how many stories is that base?
So the base underlying zoning district for the PMR is generally MR3 or high density residential. The maximum height in that zoning district, I believe, is 4 stories or 50 feet. And so that would be the case for City Bella itself. For some of these other, downtown Richfield area developments that are clearly taller than 4 stories and 50 feet, were approved at all of them as planned unit developments.
Mm-hmm. And why do we have to rezone as well as make an amendment to the PUD? Why do we have to do both?
So in this case, this property, I think, is in addition to the general requirement that the zoning districts must match state statute, this property in particular is a mixed-use development. You've got a pretty substantial shopping center on the first floor and the residential above, so it really should be zoned mixed use regardless. That's the kind of a really natural fit for this property.
And I just have one more question. At the bottom under rezoning, it said absent this application, the property would likely be rezoned later in 2020, and the city staff works as you work to update zoning designations citywide. I'm just wondering what that's going to look like, or if we have time to address that now. The part about that you're going to work to update zoning designations citywide, how will that look for us?
Commissioner Kwam, members of the commission. As part of the updating of the comprehensive plan, which we finished last year, we are required to then amend the zoning ordinances throughout the community to match that plan. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be changing zoning districts to match the plan that you just adopted at the end of last year. So it will look like the comp plan.
Okay. And we won't have to vote on it then, right? If we do?
You still have to vote on it,
Okay.
yes. There is a public hearing. Even though there were many public hearings, or there was a public hearing for the comprehensive plan, you will again have to vote on it when we change the ordinances for the zoning ordinance. That will come up again.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so I had shared an email with staff in advance of the meeting with these sort of 3 areas of concern. First one being, I think was already apparent from what I was asking of the applicant, the grade of the building site. I'm pretty concerned about it becoming lower than the existing grade, and I think that really harms the aesthetics of the site. I did bring just a couple of graphics, and I sent these to staff today, but it was kind of late, so I don't know if they have them available to show to the public, but I've got 3 of these if you want to pass. Each person can share. So these are the other 3 corners.
Are you able to are they going to be up on the screen, or are you able to go and show them at
So would it be better to do DocCam?
Yeah, we'll have the tech activate the doc cam so we can show those.
Sure. Can we leave one for 3 people then? And yeah. But since I have the printouts, you might as well use them. I gave her both. So do you want to do that Richfield one first? So these are the other existing 3 corners of the intersection. And so, because we're asking kind of a subjective thing about what's superior design in this case, which is what would warrant the flexibility of the PUD. And when I'm using to gauge what I think superior design is, I think the other 3 corners of the same intersection are good precedent. And we have a single-story commercial building that I think is very similar to what the applicant is doing on the northeast corner at the top, that has engaging, meaningful sidewalk entrances that are right from the sidewalk level. And then we have 2 larger buildings on the southeast and southwest corners that also are at sidewalk level and have very prominent entrances to them. And if you want to show the other graphic, this is an example for Medina. It's a little bit greater, I think, than the grade change they're proposing. If you could pull it up a little bit, Melissa. Or, oh, you can't. Okay, perfect. So, I mean, you can see how much worse the street presence is. Obviously, that can be improved by creating some access in terms of being able to get to the door, but that experience, whether you're walking by or driving by, is worse, and the building's aesthetics are a lot worse as a result. So, going back to my email, unless somebody wanted to say anything about those concerns specifically.
Sean, can I reply real quick? I mean, I appreciate you doing all this work, and obviously you're very passionate about this, but I guess I disagree with the site design not being superior. I think it looks great. I was a little bit nervous when this came out that this was going to be a bank. I can tell you right honestly, bank's not my first choice for that location. But when you think about a bank, it's a little bit more brick and mortar than this appears to be, which has got incorporated a lot of green space. It's got incorporated some aesthetics that I think make it an attractive development. So I understand that. I mean, if grading's a big issue, but as far as where this is going to be, and the grading that happens to be there, I really don't have any problem with the way it looks. As if these designs turn out, if the actual development turns out the way that these designs have been submitted, you know, as I said before, it's not my first choice for this corner on a bank, but I think this is a pretty good design for what's being proposed. So that's just my input.
Yeah, and part of my concern is simply the fact that not only did they inherit bad grades, they're choosing to actually make them worse by lowering that actual existing pad to a lower grade than currently exists. And I think we should expect more out of that. So I'm just going to jump ahead actually to the drive-through. Obviously, this is much closer than we normally allow of 185 versus 500 feet, so about a third of the required distance. And so I guess to me, when we're being very flexible about that, I kind of want to see something really above and beyond in terms of the building design. And of course, you may disagree, but for me, having it partially below ground really mitigates what's great about that. They've gone and added some additional things, like having that little pocket park, but we do have one of those similar things at Lyndale Station. It's a nice aesthetic thing, but it isn't super functional. It doesn't make a huge difference in the overall site issues. The second one, I'm just gonna pull up the graphic briefly if you want to look at the graphic of the pedestrian circulation. I think staff said that this is gonna be slightly improved already. Do you have an update on that?
So on that graphic that Commissioner Hayford O'Leary is showing was part of the email document that was added to the packet and that you all have in front of you. And we'll put that on the document camera as well. Commissioner Hayford O'Leary, do you want to just describe what we're
Yeah, so in this
looking at
case,
on
this is my hypothetical functional downtown Richfield walking route of somebody who lives at City Bella going to get a sandwich at Jimmy John's. And based on what's proposed, that is the walking route. And I think, if we were to come with an applicant were to come with any drive aisles that required going all the way to the far side of the building, going down a switchback, and then making, multiple 90-degree turns, I think it would be very obvious what the problem is. So I do see that staff has a suggestion in the conditions to at least add one on the west side that would improve that. But I'm concerned about this. It's not great today, but this actually adds a couple of additional turns from what's on the ground today.
I would like to say something about that as well, because I do know that there are a lot of senior citizens who live in City Bella that definitely going around this entire building, like for example, to get to the Jimmy John's or to the nail shop or to the clinic, this would be a hardship. And I mean, also already we've seen people having issues with like mobility scooters, things like that, not being able to navigate sidewalks. So adding additional turns and areas that need to be plowed pretty consistently for these to be safe for sort of the walkability that we've already designed into that intersection would just be great to see like the west side have a way for folks to get down into the parking lot. And I do think that I appreciate the photos of the Potbelly, because if I were trying to get to the Potbelly store from the sidewalk, there would be a pretty significant jaunt that I would have to go to get into the store versus being able to walk to it from the sidewalk, like all of the other buildings that are currently at the roundabout. So I guess it does make sense, and I do like seeing those things, and so thanks for those photos.
Yep.
Yes, feel free to go up. Thank you.
Sorry, David Knable again with Civil Site Group. Just if we can address that comment. That's appropriate.
Yes, could you pull the microphone up a little bit?
Oh, yep, sorry. Yeah, just to address that comment if we could at this time. First thing is, the existing, or the route that you show in your exhibit is very similar to the current path that's there now. And again, it's because of the grade change, the steep grade change between the parking lot and the existing street corner. So the current route does pretty much follow this path where you got to come up to this existing crosswalk across Lyndale on kind of the west side of the street, and then down and you cut across the existing parking lot in front of where the pergolas are and get on the sidewalk. So we're matching in pretty much with what's there. It is a couple more turns because of the accessible route to get that down to our site. But in talking to staff, they also mentioned adding a condition to add a connection to on the west side of the building. And we looked at that, and that is something that we think we can meet. We can add a sidewalk. It's because of the grade change, it's not going to be an accessible route, but we can add a sidewalk connection on the west side that'll tie into the sidewalk to make it a more direct route from that intersection that you originally looked at.
Okay.
On the west side.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And can I ask, just because I happened to include that in my email to staff, the current route is not maintained in the winter. Is that required as a matter of code? Would that have to be a specific condition to require that? And this obviously is another concern with having these stairs on the outside, that not only has to be cleared, it has to be cleared by hand to get those stairs clear in the winter.
There's not a condition in here written into this approval specifically requiring that it be cleared of snow in the winter. If there is a maintenance agreement with Public Works for this property, which I suspect there will be, clarifying snow removal at the kind of at the roundabout edge. So for the stairs and some of the new elements, that could be clarified there. But we certainly wouldn't discourage the inclusion of an additional condition, making it more clear that this route is to be cleared and maintained throughout the winter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think were there a few more issues on here that we.
I can go back into it, but I kind of don't want to dominate this just because I wrote an email. So I'd like to sort of hear from other people about where they're at in general.
Great. Okay.
I have one comment, and I think maybe this is to staff. As Commissioner O'Leary has pointed out, there's a lot of material here that I would have appreciated to have earlier. I look at the agenda and print it out and kind of read it through for several days and think about it, talk to people if necessary. I'd like to have that same opportunity, and I see this email was sent on the 6th, which was I think last Friday. So that would have been, if we can get this material sooner, I guess is my point, especially when there's this much volume. I think that would be easier for us to digest and think about.
Commissioner Lavin, I'll address that to the commission. We have had this discussion a number of times before, but due to the deadlines required and the time it takes to prepare the staff report and get it ready, that we just cannot get the materials to you any earlier than we do.
Okay. That's unfortunate. But if that's the way it is, then that's fine.
We provide the materials to you as soon as we possibly can. We are bumped up against deadlines every single month. You get it as soon as we can.
But can I clarify? Do you mean the initial staff report or my email? Yeah. So is there any means to share that? Because I've assumed that I should not send that to the commission because of open meeting rules. But if there is an appropriate way for you to share this kind of an email with things, so I'm not bombarding people, I think that's helpful.
Yes, and we can check into that with the city
No,
attorney.
I didn't mean the original agenda. I meant things that come after that.
Okay, right. Commissioner Hayford O'Leary could not send it to all of you because of open meeting law, but whether or not we can send out an addendum and add it to the online packet, we can certainly look into that. Again, this did come in Friday, and so that likely would not have happened. We would not have been able to add it to the website that late in the day. Perhaps we could have sent out an email at the end of the day, but we can certainly look into that.
Okay, thank you.
I would really support that too. This has come up before, and it would be helpful to me to get anything from other commissioners ahead of time if there's a way to do it.
I have a question about the drive-through. Commissioner Penn, you haven't really said anything yet, so do you have any questions?
I have words.
You have words? Okay,
But
maybe you could go first.
they're
'cause I
mostly
don't wanna
positive,
speak
though.
as
You
much.
know,
Okay,
I
great.
think. Do you want me to speak now? Great, I can. I did look at this quite a bit in terms of the drive-through alignment, and the grade change was something that I went back and forth on that, and I think I tend to agree with since it would require so much of the parking lot to be graded back in order to make up that grade change. I see why they chose what they did in terms of cost too. Although I'm not entirely happy with the building frontage. I am happy that there is something there that's still attractive and that there's a pocket park with all the other amenities that would become part of the streetscape to hopefully offset some of that, because the landscaping, in my opinion, on that side looks good, other than a couple sightline issues with the headlights coming out of the drive-through. I think I'm mostly happy with that, and it makes sense. Looking at the pull off, I looked at at first I wasn't sure why it would be oriented one way or the other for the ATM slip. And, of course, then it didn't make sense. At first, I was concerned that we were going to be potentially backing up, blocking the handicap spaces. And I'm sure you guys have thought through this. And then I looked at, well, what if it were turned the other way and just bumped out slightly further, closer to the drive aisle itself, to allow for the two-way traffic to enter access into there. But then the more I thought about that, that didn't make sense either. And so I think, as far as like that whole alignment, I thought that made sense. At the end of the day, it's kind of the best you could do with, that corner. My one concern was, though, with how the cars in the ATM slip are going to be oriented towards the oncoming Lindale traffic and headlights that'll be shining into there. I know there's the grade change to kind of offset that a little bit, but you still do get a lot of throw 10 feet high from, headlights. I know there is one maple tree that is part of like the direct line of sight, but that's really not going to block a ton. And I just wanted to make sure that, and I don't know if this has to be coordinated with the other parcel now, being that we're subdividing this parcel, but it seems like we're going to be losing that first really large pine tree that's there, plus probably a little bit of those shrubs that are next to it that offer that blocking right now of the headlights. And so it'd be nice to see some coordination between this parcel and the neighboring parcel to make sure that that vegetation stays intact, or at least mimics what's already there as it is. I don't know. I think that would help. I think the sidewalk access on the west side makes a lot of sense. And I was looking at other ways to configure that. I'm assuming the access on the west side, is that for trash and right? Okay, so there's really not a lot of ways to bump that out or reconfigure that to accommodate for a sidewalk, other than having that cross probably that drive access. But it's really only used for trash and maybe pedestrian entrance, correct? Okay, so I see that kind of working. I don't know. I think overall, I'm happy to see something there. I thought through a lot of the same issues that you guys probably had encountered in this, and I think, overall, I feel fairly good about it. I would like to see something else done with maybe the height to offset that a little bit, rather than just having, like, you showed the pot belly up on France, and yeah, it looks buried in there. But I don't know how high you can really put like some sort of false roof facade or something like that to extend the height, if that's even worth it. I don't know. It just seems like it's a superficial cost when it all comes down to it. And maybe we focus our energy on and making the actual pocket park space that much more inviting and that much more of the actual streetscape than kind of have that be equal partner with the building, in terms of visual quality. But overall, I think I tend to agree with the plan, and I think it makes sense as it stands with what we had to work with.
Thank you. You guys have any comments? I would like to talk a little bit more about the variance that we would be approving for the drive-throughs. I know that in the staff report, it talked a little bit about the variance maybe specifically being focused around fast food restaurants or fast food. However, I guess for me, there seems to be a lot of issues with the project that don't just relate to the drive-through, but we are offering a huge, like, we're conceding quite a bit of like feet, and we're going, way against what our code is in order to put the bank in, when the entrance to the bank isn't actually even going to match any of the surrounding buildings that are currently at the roundabout at one of our major intersections in Richfield. So what about this project and the way it is makes it worth it to kind of move our variance or go make this conditional use the way, what would, I guess, why would the staff feel so strongly that another drive-through is appropriate in this space in Richfield?
Sure. So the Chair Hoberg, members of the commission. So the proposed building itself, kind of tried to, as we took our initial pass at this, kind of separated the building issues from the drive-through issues. The building itself met all code requirements. It meets many city policies about pulling buildings up close to the street. Staff, the grade issues, that certainly wouldn't be our first choice either. We did have a discussion with the applicant at our initial administrative review about why the building needed to be lowered, and then they provided the same explanation that you heard tonight. The only thing I'll add on that is that even though this is a new development, a new building, it is tying in. The reality is that it is part of an existing site, a property that was built some 30 plus years ago, so that, to an extent, they are adding to what's already there. This isn't brand new undeveloped site. They do have to match grades with that existing parking lot. On the drive-through, so why the question why staff supports varying this through the PUD for the distance to another financial institution. So while there are many drive-throughs in this downtown Richfield area at 66th and Lyndale, including just to the north of this property at Wendy's, across the street at the Caribou drive-through, those don't factor into the code consideration. The code says substantially similar uses, so the only one that we're looking at from a distance perspective is the other bank. The BMO Harris Bank, like the staff report said, property line to property line, which is what the code says, measured out at about 185 feet. On the ground, if you go stand approximately at the roundabout where the proposed building is, why staff felt it was appropriate to vary that, kind of two reasons. One being that the BMO Harris Bank certainly has its own it has some unique conditions of its own, being that it's almost entirely hidden behind the Woodlake Center office building. You can't really see that bank property at all from where this will be built, and you certainly can't see the drive-through lanes and the queuing cars and the negative impacts that drive-throughs do produce. And then secondly, not all drive-throughs are created equal. This, like the staff report said, this initially had a much larger drive-through loop that staff did not support. We made that very clear to the applicant. We did not support what was initially proposed. We would not lend our support to what was initially proposed here. Hypothetically speaking, we would very likely also not support another fast food drive-through or another sort of full-scale drive-through at this corner. This proposed drive-up ATM is, I would say, a shade of gray in the world of drive-throughs. It's not strictly black and white. All drive-throughs are the same. This one is a small loop off the drive aisle, or a small kind of slip lane off the drive aisle, versus a large loop that just doesn't seem to have the same type of impacts of queuing cars and traffic that, say, a full service drive-through or a different type of drive-through use would have.
My question is, are we sure that the queuing won't be excessive here? I mean, I look at it has room for like 3 cars or 2 cars before it gets into, the possibility of disruption in the parking lot. Does that seem, that's a concern for me. And I obviously, when you look, there's no way to really, you can't move the drive-through more to the north to even accommodate that. But especially in winter when no one wants to get out of the cars. You look at the BMO drive-through in their the room that they have in there, and I don't know how much that's used, but it just seems to me like this is really pressing the limit on what would be acceptable in terms of not being able to kind of disrupt the other traffic flow. I don't know if you've had talks with the tenant about that, or if there's concerns or what their projections are, but I think that for me that. And I agree with you on your points. It's just, I hope that doesn't prove to be an issue down the road.
Yeah, you can approach the mic. You want to respond if you have any information from the tenant on average queuing times or anything to that effect.
Good evening. My name is Teron Wright. I work for the Architects Partnership. We are the architect of record for the project. I just want to address that question regarding the queuing. Typically, Chase allows for about 4 cars for stacking. this layout would allow for 3. There is a possibility to adjust the ATM and move it further east to allow for that 4th car, which would match the city of Richfield's queuing requirements. Yeah, there's a possibility to do that. Yeah.
If
Why
I may.
not do that?
Well, if I may, I was looking at that option as you're earlier today, and it seemed like if you actually did push that up, though, that now the ATM would be sitting in direct line of sight of your way to merge out of traffic, not at a perfect 90-degree
Okay.
to the traffic too. So it is kind of a visual obstacle, but you physically could do it.
Or as the one commissioner mentioned, that was the reason why we stopped it short.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just wanted to say a little bit. I'm a little confused by staff's explanation of the relative support for this drive-through because we're being asked to overlook a very sort of cut and dry numerical difference based on subjective, somewhat subjective factors. Of the design of the Wood Lake Center site is unique. It's somewhat insulated from the property line. The code does say property line to property line. But on the other hand, we're not considering any of the other factors that would be unfavorable to the applicant, like the fact that there are like 5 other different types of drive-throughs in this area. So can we only consider things that benefit the applicant's position in this, or how are we allowed to consider, since it is a PUD, things like there's a drive-through across the street, there's a drive-through on the northeast corner of the same parcel, the Wendy's?
The code requirement is that they be separated from substantially similar uses. So the code requirement is specifically about bank to bank or fast food to fast food. So when we're looking at the separation, you can certainly consider it as part of your review of the project. But in terms of a code requirement, there's no code requirement that the bank drive-through would have to be at all separated from a Wendy's parcel or a Caribou parcel. Was that the question?
Yeah, I guess my question is why should we be looking at the design aspects that allow us to overlook the 500-foot thing, but not consider things like there are other different types of drive-throughs there? So both of those are variations from the code, 500 feet to substantially similar uses. One benefits the applicant of it's okay for it to be closer than is normally allowed. One would not.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. I am missing a piece here.
I guess I'm just confused why we should be overlooking a cut and dry thing based on design factors, but then not consider other design factors or other considerations of this specific site in this location. Things like the aesthetics of Lindale having drive-throughs on both sides as you're coming through this area.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you. You can absolutely consider other things in a PUD because in a PUD, it needs to fit into the development. It is subjective, but it needs to be something above and beyond in order to grant this flexibility. So from staff's perspective, there were a number of reasons why we thought for this development under these conditions, this was a good use. It was a nice looking building. They did what they could to mitigate the drive-through factor. We thought it was enough given these specific circumstances. That doesn't mean that the commission needs to find that it is enough.
Okay, thank you. And then just one specific question on Commissioner Pinn's question about the headlights. Has that been reviewed? Is that a problem of the way the drive-through is currently sited? Would that be visible to drivers or bicyclists or whoever on southbound Lindale?
We didn't specifically discuss that. As noted, the site plan layout was evolving, pretty late into the process to change the previously proposed drive-through loop to add this plaza. Staff will certainly work with the applicant to ensure that appropriate screening is used to mitigate headlight spill. The concern is duly noted.
Great.
I do have another question. And this is for staff about the 500-foot rule. Is that typically from property line to property line, center of property, from use to use? So I'm just looking at, I'm splitting hairs here, but trying to come to 500 somehow or get close to that as well. And looking at, the actual drive-through is an additional 150 feet, further back on the property versus, the property corner. And I was just wondering if that factors in at all or doesn't matter.
Sure. Members of the commission, Commissioner Pinn, the code requirement is 500 feet property line to property line. That's the verbatim code requirement. Sort of the additional dialogue and language in the staff report was that was all staff's findings that the BMO Harris Bank was somewhat unusual, and then it was on one single lot with that larger Woodlake Center office complex. But the code requirement is 500 feet lot line to lot line. There is an additional, and perhaps this will clarify some of Commissioner Hayford O'Leary's kind of previous question. There is an additional condition. This was discussed in the requirements attachment, and staff found this requirement to be met. The code says uses with drive-up window or teller service may not be located adjacent to a property with an existing drive-up window or teller service unless the applicant can demonstrate that the use will not be detrimental to pedestrian, bicycle, or vehicle movements. That requirement is met on this property. While it is certainly directly adjacent to the Wendy's to the north, the proposed drive-up ATM was not found to be detrimental to any mode of transportation because all vehicle access does occur within that parking lot. There's no new curb cuts proposed that would cross a bikeway or sidewalk, and the separate pedestrian routes through the property are provided. So that was another requirement that quite potentially could not have been met, but we found that in this case it was.
Commissioner Pinn, if I might follow up. You asked about separation, maybe from facility to facility as well. Was that part of your question? From the actual drive-through to the actual drive-through?
Correct, yeah.
So I'm measuring that as the crow flies. It's approximate, but roughly 562 feet is what I'm coming up with.
A question for Commissioner Hayford O'Leary. With the concession of having a whatever they said, a west entrance, I mean, overall, does that make much difference to your concerns, and are you overall against this because of the drive-through and the grade change?
For me, I am still overall against this. I think that either the building needs to have superior design, which I would say at least as good as the other three corners, or they need to not need this extreme flexibility on the drive-through requirement. If one of those were fixed, I would be happy to support it. And I will say, if this does go forward, I think staff and the applicant have done a really nice job making the best of what we can, but it's still not good enough at this point for me.
Can you explain superior design between this and like My Burgers?
My Burger has a meaningful sidewalk entrance. There's a lot of sidewalk activity that occurs. In fact, I believe their only entrance is facing the sidewalk, so there's a lot of customer traffic. It makes downtown Richfield a nicer place to be because you have hundreds of customers streaming in and out. This is clearly a secondary entrance. It's below the street level. You have to kind of work to get to it.
But they're adding a west, if they add a west sidewalk, wouldn't that be two entrances into the same property?
It would improve the access to the mall, and I would certainly appreciate that, but I don't think that creates the street presence, creates the street experience that you certainly get from My Burger or from City Bella or the other developments.
Okay.
I also would say that the west access will not be accessible. It sounds like potentially it's a stairway that would be coming from the sidewalk down in an area where we already have issues with keeping the sidewalk clear of snow for people who are using a wheelchair, for people who are using a walker, for people who are using a cane. That is a huge concern in that intersection for me, because I drive through that intersection quite often, and I do see people who have mobility issues using that area all the time. So, at this point, it sounds like we should take action, or would somebody like to make a motion on things moving forward, or kind of maybe clarify where we're at?
I'm wondering at what point we add the amendment of, making sure there's a west access added. Do we add that after we make the regular motion?
Because we've already had your suggestion of addressing the vegetation.
I don't know if we can add my suggestion, being that the majority of the vegetation that's needed is actually off the parcel and
Got
is
it.
part of the existing larger unit. So
Okay.
it's just in good faith to work with the other property owner to just try to find a way to address that screening there. But it's not directly on your parcel where that line of sight is out of the headlights. So, yeah, I don't know if we can add that.
Chair Hoberg, members of the commission, there is stipulation written into the draft resolution in front of you that if grades allow, an additional pedestrian route shall be added in the southwest corner of the building, connecting the sidewalk to 66th Street, or connecting the sidewalk on 66th Street to the existing pedestrian route on the property. And as the developer indicated tonight, they have begun looking into that and believe that they can accommodate that request. They have indicated that additional connection would require a stair. I don't think we can ask that they make that a handicap accessible entrance due to the grades in the property. There are multiple, in addition to the existing accessible route on the property that they're maintaining, there is an additional accessible way into the property by continuing west on the sidewalk on 66th Street and using an alternate connection to get to the front of the HCMC clinic area. So I believe that the condition that's in the proposed resolution should cover that, and I think the application has shown, or the applicant has shown, that they're working on making that happen.
Madam Chair, would staff be supportive of removing the condition if grades allow, since staff have reviewed it and the applicant has responded to it?
I suppose so. I don't believe that it's necessary, given that they've shown
Okay.
here tonight that they are working on that. At this point, they've indicated, and it's on the record here, that grades do allow
Okay.
for a stairway connection to be added. So we will certainly expect to see that on revised plans going forward.
Thank you.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion or make a recommendation?
Madam Chair, I'll recommend a motion to approve. Chair, just read the language as is. Recommendation: an ordinance amending Appendix 1 of the Richfield City Code to change the zoning designation of the Market Plaza Village Shores property from planned multifamily residential PMR to planned mixed use. Do we have to separate these motions?
You can, if you'd like. It may be advisable in this case,
Okay.
just to take those on separate votes.
Okay, so we'll stop there.
Second. For the rezone.
All right. Any discussion? All right. So moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Madam
Great,
Chair, I'd
motion
also like to
passes.
recommend approval of a resolution amending the plan unit development conditional use permit and final development plan for the Market Plaza Village Shores as presented here tonight, with the exception of the walkway that we've discussed.
Second.
Or I should say with the addition of the walkway that we discussed. Sorry.
So I would like to make a motion to amend, and I just want to be completely frank. I will be voting against this motion because I do feel very strongly against it, but I think there is consensus around the amendment about the snow clearing, so I would like to make a motion to amend this to require that all walkways within the development that are added, including staircases, are kept clear of snow and any other debris.
Second.
Or any discussion? Further discussion? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All in favor say nay. Nay.
But this is just for the
Sorry.
amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. So aye to that.
Yep. So we should wait for so the amendment was moved and seconded, and the amendment was passed.
Yes,
I
the
believe. So
that
now we're
amendment
back
was
to
passed.
the main motion.
Did we need to make an amendment to address the issue that you had brought up of adding the path regardless of the grade?
I'm satisfied with staff's response unless somebody
Okay.
else wants to make that.
Great.
So I will just, reiterate, I think there is consensus around approving this, and I certainly respect my colleagues in doing that. There are definitely benefits to this development, but for me, the bottom line is that this is much worse than the other three corners. There are some circumstances that led it to this situation, but they are not required to install a drive-through. They are not required, although I understand it's cost-effective, to lower the building as they are, and I will be voting against this.
All right, I will be voting against it. I already accidentally said nay for the last one, but just because I think it's a great building, but I don't think it matches the current developments that we have put around that roundabout at one of our busiest intersections in Richfield. And I think, again, it adds a lot to pedestrian traffic. It adds a lot of inconvenience to the pedestrian traffic that we have tried to ease around that roundabout. So I will be also voting against it at this point to allowing the drive-through.
Chair Hilberg, members of the commission, I did want to clarify. So we, Commissioner Lavin made a motion, which was successfully amended by the Hayford O'Leary amendment. That motion, the main motion now would have to be seconded and voted on. Or the motion as amended needs to be seconded and then voted on. So we would recommend the approval of an ordinance amending appendix of the Richfield City Code to change the zoning designation. Number one has already that has
one's
already
done. Okay,
been moved and passed. We're on number 2 on the PUD.
We need to re-second it, even though
It was not seconded.
Oh, it was not. I thought
It was.
I
It
thought
was
Commissioner
seconded.
Quam seconded the first.
Oh.
Yes.
So I think we have the motion as amended.
And there
We've
was a
spoken.
second.
Second.
Okay. And we have spoken to it. So all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
No. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, everybody. The next thing on our agenda is the cancellation of a public hearing to consider an amendment to the Richfield Bloomington Honda conditional use permit, final development plans, and planned unit development.
Thank you, Commission. This has come up a couple of times. We've continued this hearing a couple of times while the applicant has worked on some revised plans. At this point, staff recommends canceling the public hearing, and we will republish when they're ready to move forward.
I move that we cancel the public hearing.
Second. Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All right, all in favor say nay. All right, motion passes. That is canceled. Next up on the agenda are the liaison reports. So the first report we have is the Community Services Advisory Commission.
I have no report.
All right. City Council. Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
Their meeting is next week, so no report.
Great, thank you. The Richfield School Board. Oh, Jim's not here, right? The Transportation Commission.
Just to note that we had a presentation on the Penn, sort of the feedback from the first open house on Penn Avenue, and just talking about sort of the process of what they'll be looking at in that process. Mostly we just chatted though, so I don't have key takeaways of what was said.
Okay, thank you. The Chamber of Commerce. All right, so next up is the City Planners Reports.
I don't have any report. Have a nice holiday.
Wow, great. So the next meeting that we have of the Planning Commission is Monday, January 27th, 2020 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. So meeting adjourned. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.